You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Today we're talking with a woman whose activism on behalf of women surviving sexual assault and other violence turned into having to fight that fight on her own behalf. We'll also hear from a woman who's explored messages our bodies are sending us and others that we think we know, but which might surprise us. Then our entertainment correspondent will hearten us with her sum-up of 2014's feminist moments in the film industry. And today we have our annual Ink Smear Awards, examples of what not to do in media. But first, we need to look inside the headlines. Last March on this program, one of our guests was Ikumi Yoshimatsu, a former Japanese beauty queen who had become a feminist in her battles with the Yakuza, the Japanese gangster underground, very powerful, that controls the recording industry there and the entertainment industry in general. And she'd taken a stand against them and a stand for women's rights, and she's now doing a talk show. We discussed the comfort women problem, which was mostly Korean, but also Philippine women who were abducted and forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese during World War II as, quote, comfort women for their troops. She deplored the resistance of Japan to continuing its acknowledgement and apology for that. There had been one, but the current right-wing government has undone the apology. The flood of vituperous email and Facebook and Twitter attacks on her and on the program was definitely bracing. It cleared your sinuses. There's an extremely activist far right there. But she clung to her position, and obviously we clung to ours. Well, the story has surfaced again, this time in a major way trying to undo the second largest newspaper in Japan, the Asahi Shimbun. About 30 years ago, an investigative reporter for the Asahi, Takashi Umura, broke the story of the comfort women. Now 56 and retired from journalism, he has become an ace target of Japan's political right. Threats of violence have cost him his university teaching job, and ultranationalists have even gone after his kids, have posted online messages, internet messages, urging people to drive his teenage daughter to suicide. The Asahi, which has long been the newspaper that Japanese right-wingers love to hate, it's left-leaning, is the target now of such attacks that it may actually go under. The campaign is gone beyond anything post-war Japan has seen, with nationalist politicians, including the Prime Minister Abe himself, unleashing such a torrent of abuse that it has cowed one of the last strongholds of progressive political influence in Japan, this newspaper. The Japanese right is claiming that the Asahi alone is to blame for persuading the world that the comfort women were victims of coercion. You understand that, of course, they really were prostituted women, say the right wing, who were looking for work, and it was all their fault. Though scores of women have come forward with testimony about their ordeals, their torture, their imprisonment, their sexual slavery, the Japanese right sticks by its position, even in the face of international condemnation, and that includes a 2007 resolution by our own U.S. House of Representatives that called on Japan to apologize for, quote, one of the largest cases of human trafficking in the 20th century. Ikumi Yoshimatsu was the canary in the mine in terms of pulling down on her the abuse that her statement on this program garnered. If you want to hear it or check out the two programs that she did with us, they were in March of 2014, and you can access them by putting her name, Ikumi Yoshimatsu, into the search engine on the site of WMClive.com. we're not going to stop, because once caught red-handed, then the scoundrel's last resort, of course, is to deny that the crime ever existed. And now for our first guest. Since 2004, Erin Helfert has been working in the area of gender as an advocate and a specialist on various projects, including those with USAID and the UN and the European Union throughout the Global South. From 2008 to 2009, she lived and worked in Casablanca, Morocco, to conduct research on gender and justice reform there. At the end of 2008, she fell victim to the very violence that she was researching: sexual assault. And since then, she has engaged in an international legal and personal struggle that has bonded her to the broader struggle against sexual violence globally. Because of her stubbornness, her case set 3 precedents in Morocco. It was the first case in a Moroccan court that accepted DNA evidence at her insistence. It was the first case in which the sentencing for the perpetrator was higher than the previously maximum penalty of 2 years for sexual assault. Her perpetrator got 6 years. And although Moroccan courts do supply free court-appointed lawyers for defense, they do not supply them to the victim. The court, however, allotted her one because, again, of her stubbornness. Here is Erin Helfert to tell her story herself. Welcome, Erin, to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you, Robin. Good morning.
Well, good morning to you. What a story. I have to say at the outset that what is most remarkable to me about you is that many people, after such a trauma, would not have gone back to the subject matter. And instead, you doubled down, as they say, and are doing the most amazing work on violence against women. So start back at the diplomat's house in Casablanca that fateful evening.
Okay. Well, I actually wanted to begin just quickly by saying that life has really come in a series of bittersweet circles, just to lead into how I got into this work a little bit. First of all, I attended a parochial school when I was young and was regularly admonished and at one point banned from school activities for having read Revolution from Within, as well as Sisterhood is Powerful. So it's pretty amazing to me that that I'm now speaking with one of my sheroes. So I had to get that out of the way.
That's very kind and dear of you. But then you have to take on board that you're one of mine now.
Well, thank you. I'm honored. And, and I think secondly, although life is often filled with these bittersweet cycles, correct, I was researching this topic, and I was always from a very young age drawn to the Kingdom of Morocco. I'd gone there from a young age, and then continued to, basically research it as any way that I could. But with a particular focus on the various feminist movements, because there were many there, and having taken a particular interest in sexual gender-based violence, I moved to Morocco in 2008 again from Paris to specifically look at the rise of the feminine middle class and how that had affected justice reform with regard to gender-based violence. At that time, I also needed a bit of money, so I ended up taking work within the private sector in Morocco. And through that private sector job, I ended up meeting, a smattering of the diplomatic community within Morocco, some of whom were American, many of whom were American, which, I think at that time, my life was basically the culmination of everything I had always wanted. I was there researching, I was in the country I wanted to be in the culture that I loved, speaking, having regular interactions with the more vociferous women of the very active and political women's groups there. And suddenly then comes New Year's Eve. I was invited to a gathering, to a house I had been to on many different occasions. It was a friend of mine, a U.S. diplomat, and I had been a little ill. I wasn't feeling well, so I ended up going upstairs to the guest bedroom where I had regularly slept before. It was a comfortable space for me. And while it's difficult for me to hash out the details of what happened, just emotionally, I would say it's a little bit difficult.
Of course.
But what ensued that evening was a series of violations that occurred throughout the evening.
Oh.
And I knew the individual was a Moroccan citizen, but I think one thought that occurred, I will say in the early morning after, is I can't believe that this is happening to me. You know, that this is happening to me after the most dramatic irony of the situation.
Of course, it is the most dramatic. You're absolutely right.
And the first thing that I did, I've never been raised to think that I am at fault or that this was a shameful thing that happened to me. I went down the hall to the diplomat's room. I knocked on his door. I asked him if he could take me to either the police or the hospital, but take me somewhere. He immediately said, no, I will take you home, and I want nothing more to do with it.
Do we know, clearly, let me interrupt you for 1 second, because my fangs are growing out even as you speak. We clearly know the diplomat's name. Have we moved any wheels to complain about the diplomat?
I will say that I have made it known in the State Department. I guess I want to make it very clear that I specifically do. He is named in the Cosmopolitan article that will be coming out, but or that is out. But prior to that, I'll go ahead and keep his name silent for now.
Okay.
I want to make mention that every organization has bad apples. And I think it's really important to highlight that this is a unique individual and not representative of the entire agency.
No, of course.
Which is why I felt it important to name him or to single out the fact that this is an individual who made a terrible moral decision, as well as he did not uphold the duties his
of his office. That's correct.
Office, right.
That's correct. And we don't want his happening again to some other hapless woman. So it's very good. We'll talk in a minute about the Cosmopolitan piece that is now on stand. So go on.
So after that time, of course, it took me. I guess I took about a 12-hour break in which I thought about it a bit and thought about what can I do, because the one thing that I had always learned from speaking again with these very strong and powerful women's advocates in Morocco is that there was no trust of the authorities to actually prosecute, to believe the victim first off. The onus is on the victim to prove that violence had even occurred, and then furthermore to take it to court was very unheard of. This is a space in which only 6% of reported rape ever receive a conviction.
And so is rape still a crime in Morocco against public morality, not against a person?
Not necessarily. It is more and more because Morocco was one of the first signatories to the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, or all forms of discrimination against the CEDAW. So I would say that no, it is definitely seen not necessarily as a violent crime, but as a crime committed not necessarily against the morality of the state, but truly the individual. I do feel that there has been a shift, and it was noted to me that there has been a shift.
Okay.
Nevertheless, the likelihood of it seeing the light of day in a court system is really unheard of. And so more often than not, these women would discourage female victims from pursuing their case.
And Morocco used to have the which some countries still have, the requirement that if a victim consented to marry her rapist, this always blew my mind, then he didn't have to serve any time. Not that he would anyway, but that has gone by the wayside too, I take it.
Well, it actually, most unfortunately, it hasn't, but it's really unfathomable in a large urban center. That would be unfathomable. But recently, in 2012, there was a young woman she was 16 and had been raped 3 times by the same individual. She was in a very rural area, and her family was at a complete disadvantage, and they chose to marry her to the rapist, and she subsequently committed suicide, but there was huge public outcry. Thank goodness.
I see.
There was huge public outcry that people were shocked that this was still a part of their legal system, that this was even on the books. So I think that the women's groups there are not going to let this stand. So hopefully, I'm hoping this will be on the out, but I as of now know it is not. That is still a possibility.
You pursued this case when in fact it went nowhere in Morocco. You pursued this case all the way back to the United States, and it's because of you, in no small part, that the Violence Against Women Act is now likely, let's hope, to be extended to women victimized by sexual assault abroad. Isn't that true?
What has come about, in no small part due to a woman named Joy Frost, who's the head of the Office of Victims of Crime in the Department of Justice, is the VOCA has been used to fund the Vision 21 program. A part of this program is specifically focused on U.S. overseas victims of sexual assault. Mm-hmm. We're hoping eventually that the VAWA will be expanded because, as we know, each year, and in no small part due to Joy Frost, the VAWA has been expanded to cover those in the LGBT community, Native American women.
Right.
It would be my hope that in the near future it would be extended to cover U.S. overseas victims of sexual assault or domestic abuse.
That would be incredible. In the current issue of Cosmopolitan, there's a special story about all of this, and you spoke recently at a Paris conference on this too, didn't you?
Right. It was a conference that focused internationally on fighting violence against women, with a particular focus on what is in the EU called the Istanbul Convention. I can state that domestically it's very similar to the International Violence Against Women Act that is being proposed in both the House and Senate, though has not yet passed. Right. Which is something I'd like to emphasize.
Yeah.
I very much, just to make the point on the International Violence Against Women Act, it is an act that does have strong bipartisan support. It unlike many other efforts to end violence against women, usually done through USAID, sometimes the DoD, it is a more defined, comprehensive approach to prevention, care, and prosecution of sexual gender-based violence. I'm very impressed by it, even having gone through the situation myself. So I'm looking forward to that passage in the near future. And one way that I hope to contribute to its passage is many naysayers to this act when it is brought up before the House Foreign Relations Committee and likewise in the Senate. They state, what does this have to do with Americans? And I want to be the voice that says, let me tell you what this has to do with Americans.
Exactly.
Gender-based violence knows no national boundaries. And the fact is there are 9 million Americans at any given time who are traveling or are overseas.
You are uniquely placed and you are actually making good politics and policy changes out of grief. So thank you, Erin. Thank you for the work that you've done and for just being who you are. And thank you also for being with us today on Women's Media Center Live. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
It's time for a short break here on Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and in just a minute we'll be speaking with a woman who has learned to analyze and pass on the political messages that your body and mind are sending us. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Our next guest is Kimberly Dark. She's a speaker, writer, a sociology professor, and a storyteller. What a combination. She's the author of 5 award-winning performance scripts and educational programs regarding the body in culture, how appearance and identity influences our experiences in the world related to gender, race, body type or size, beauty, ability, and so forth. When she starts talking, I bet you'll find yourself saying, of course, I recognize that." Kimberly, welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, you are quite a special Renaissance woman, one could say. You're a speaker, you're a writer, you're a sociology professor, and you're a storyteller and a dramatist. So sociology does not necessarily usually go with storytelling. How did you get into doing all these many things and doing them so well and focusing on the body and the flesh in culture?
Yeah, look, you're right that sociology does not necessarily call up the most interesting stories. And I just thought that was absolutely tragic. Like, we're talking about all of these really vital, interesting things that could seriously help, human culture and interactions if we had broader discussions about them. And nobody cares if we're boring. And so, it's true, right? I mean,
It is.
Time ago, I was, I did creative writing, and I kind of thought, I'm a poet, and I do this community organizing and sociology work, but never the twain shall meet, as they say. And over time, it became clear that no, actually, the work that I do in community organizing and facilitation is a whole lot like performance when it works well, and teaching as well.
Yes.
And so I started using, more creative writing and more kind of spoken word performance to get at social issues in through the body, and that's the key, I think, for all of my work, is that the body is the significant artifact. So in sociological circles, or I guess I should say humanities, social science circles, what I do is called autoethnography, which is very different than autobiography. Mm-hmm. And the way I usually explain that is that every story is about me, but I'm not the subject. The subject is always something about the culture. It's just I'm using my body and my life and my experience as a doorway into discussions about the culture. So in essence, I'm using humor and storytelling to help people talk about things they don't think they want to talk about.
I bet people are so grateful for this, that it's fun and it's interesting and it's moving and it isn't dry. Give us an example of what you use your own experience and stuff, but you're not the subject. Give us an example.
Yeah. So for instance, if someone wanted to look up, I mean, there's a number of stories on YouTube at this point, and my website is kimberlydark.com. There's some links there.
Good.
So if somebody wanted to look up a story, they could. For instance, there's a story there about big people on the airplane, and it's about I'm a big person, and it's about me sitting on an airplane, and across the aisle is a tall, muscular guy who also does not fit into his seat very well. But the way people look at him and interact with him is very different than the way somebody looks at and interacts with someone who is fat. And yet we maintain this sort of cultural monologue that says, well, fat people on the airplane, I mean, they're taking up more space and they're using more fuel, and they're gonna. Well, the same thing is true of someone who has a very laudable body type that happens to be large also, but we're not worried about that.
Right.
So
also, he's a boy and you're a girl.
True that.
And that makes a big difference right there.
It's a huge difference. But so this is the way that my body in that instance becomes the doorway into a humorous discussion about how we use public space. And I think particularly for women, we are afraid to call attention to our bodies other than in very specific stylized ways. Mm-hmm. And part of what I'm doing on stage is interrupting that. By being me on stage, I am performing the middle-aged body, the sexualized body, the fat body, the lesbian body, the parent body, all those things and more.
How interesting. I'll try an example on you, and you tell me if this fits. in the 70s, when I became, after years of marching peacefully and signing petitions and all of that, when the anti-war and the civil rights became more violent, I participated in, I've written about this at length, in various guerrilla theater and also guerrilla actions. And I like to think, and I always did say, that this was because I was radicalized and militant and, all of that. But it actually had a lot to do with the fact that at my height of heights, I was 5'2". That was my Amazonian tallest. Now I've shrunk to 5 feet. And when I attended mass demonstrations, somebody would cry out, "The TPF, the Tactical Police Force on horses," they were quite brutal, "are coming, they're coming." And people would disperse, and I would be left standing saying, where? Because I couldn't see over anybody's shoulder. So I began to fall into tactics that you did at 3 o'clock in the morning with a small affinity group, and then you ran away simply because I could see what I was doing. Is that so that my actual physical reality still does had an effect on my politics?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a brilliant example that obviously you came to a place where you could theorize and write about this experience that you were having as an embodied person in those settings.
Yeah.
But it was first the embodiment that drove that experience.
Absolutely.
That is precisely what I'm getting at, and I think that it's how people live their lives. We don't think that through, but our own embodiment, and this is why things like gender and race and sexuality and blah 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 all matter a great deal in terms of how we understand the world, and that it's helpful to be able to understand our own embodiment. Like, I'm not a fan of getting stuck on labels, but I am a fan of understanding how daily privilege and oppression are organized.
Yes.
And affect us, so that we can understand more about, our place in the world and our place in changing the world.
And how do you communicate this now? You do stand-up speeches, you do lectures, you write about it. You've done these performance scripts. Tell about them.
Right. I write performance scripts. I also write, I also contribute quite often as an essayist and op-ed article writer in various venues, but these performance scripts are significant, obviously, because there I am standing on the stage. I perform at colleges and universities, theaters, festivals, conferences, these kind of venues where people are gathered. I love the colleges and universities because often they are those audiences sometimes are compelled to come. They wouldn't normally be there,
and their life gets changed.
Exactly, and so there's a way that there's also a thing that I do in performance, which really comes out of the years I spent doing facilitation and community organizing, which is to prompt the audience to look not just at me, but to look at each other. In the course of, listening to various stories. So sometimes this is really significant with gender, to ask, has anybody had this experience in the audience? And then say, hang on, look around you and see that is only women raising their hands right now, or mostly men raising their hands, and
sure.
and then the audience can start to notice, well, what does that mean that we know so little about each other's
right.
deep experiences?
Right. That's just fascinating work.
So I find a lot of what I do is about finding sort of new and clever ways to reveal what we've hidden from ourselves about the social construction of gender and race,
right.
and all of these.
Well, also you legitimize us because you're a sociology professor. So you legitimize us crazy activists and organizers, even though you secretly are one. This is wonderful work. Say the website again before we go. Kimberly Dark.
Yeah. My website is KimberlyDark.com. It's KimberlyDark, just like dark and light. And I'm also on Facebook and Twitter, and I'm easy to find on the web. And I go where I'm invited.
Oh,
so I also do some retreats. All of that is at the website.
This sounds delicious. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you do, Kimberly, because it's very valuable.
Thank you for the work you do and have done in the past. I greatly appreciate that, too.
Well, I'm grateful also that you were with us on Women's Media Center Live. Thank you, and keep on being embodied and smart.
Thank you.
And now it's time for the annual Ink Smear Awards. The Ink Smear Awards are bestowed by this program on members of the media or media institutions that have behaved in sexist, racist, or merely incompetent ways in which we do not wish media to act. So let's start with Mark Whitaker, the biographer of Bill Cosby, the former editor of Newsweek, so he should know better, who thoroughly researched this biography, publicized it widely. It came out some time ago. I think it was a bestseller, got a lot of publicity, and never once mentioned any of these women in it. And yet he knew. We now know he knew. It was suspected at the time, but we now know he knew because, in fact, he has admitted that he knew, and he has, after the fact, apologized. The question is, do we ever believe anything he writes again, and do we accept his apology? Continuing with Cosby, could we begin to establish a precedent in media to avoid scenes like Scott Simon's interview with both Cosbys on NPR, where she, of course, Camille, sat at his side, looking beautiful and elegant, smiling and saying nothing? She's been the philanthropist, she's the art collector, she's the political activist, always has been. By the way, there's a wonderful article that ran by Mary Curtis in the Washington Post on Camille Cosby, and it's worth a read. But could we establish a precedent where if the wife is forced or wishes to stand by the side of the badly acting husband, the camera is off her, the camera focuses on the subject, so that she is not stuck there smiling wanly and squirming? The same would have been true of the Associated Press interview with Cosby, where he tried to scuttle any record of questions about the charges, and she just sort of sat there and tried to smile. Moving along on the good wife front, Ray Rice's wife at his 2 press conferences. The first time she looked simply stunned and PTSD-racked and miserable. The second time, with her parents standing by, the stand-up interview in the kitchen, was all the more appalling to me because this time, of course, he was saying she was his queen, he had learned his lesson, she could do no wrong, she was powerful in the relationship, and she just stood there. But the interviewer did ask questions directed at her, and guess who answered them? Ray did. And the interviewer, because these are media critiques, the interviewer did not say, "Excuse me, I asked her, not you." The interviewer accepted his answer. This happened 2 or 3 times. What about follow-up? And for that matter, what about due diligence? Doesn't the press know that in most major restaurants, hotels, etc., all elevators have cameras? Wouldn't it have occurred to them that if there was a story about him hitting her in some elevator somewhere, there might have been footage long before the footage surfaced? Whatever happened to reporting? Then there's the Taylor Swift and Spotify coverage. Taylor Swift, you might know, is the biggest pop star in the world today. And you might have heard that she withdrew her music from the streaming service Spotify because Spotify does not pay artists. And there's a big campaign on called I Respect Music about paying artists for streaming, paying artists for radio play, and so forth. So she pulled her entire catalog. Spotify responded, she was followed by a number of big-name male musicians. Spotify responded to her very differently from the way it responded to them. With them, they said nothing or expressed regret. With her, however, they patronized her. They took lyrics from her songs about breakups of relationships and listed them saying, "Oh, Taylor, come back to us. We can be together again," using her own lyrics in this controversy. But the media story is that not one media outlet until this very moment noticed the difference in the treatment. And that's the largest pop star in the world, a businesswoman, an artist, a serious musician, and still the treatment was that profoundly different. Next to last, we have Rolling Stone. Of course, if we had 12 hours, we might be able to examine what went wrong with Rolling Stone. But suffice it to say that from start to finish, this has been a disaster. They picked somebody. They decided that they wanted to go after a survivor. She didn't want to do the interview. They convinced her. At the end, she regretted it and asked them not to run it. They ran it, and then, of course, wound up blaming her. They have now retracted the blame, making themselves look all the more ridiculous on all fronts. Not a good year for Rolling Stone. And last but hardly least, there's Don Lemon, the CNN anchor. Every time he touches on anything to do with women, he wears his foot in his mouth. It is amazing to me how anyone who is both gay and black can be that dumb and that insensitive. So those are the Ink Smear Awards for 2014. It's time for another quick pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and when I return, we'll be hearing from Melissa Silverstein, our entertainment correspondent here in the program, with her year-end summary of actual feminist moments in the film industry. Yes, you may say you're shocked, but it's true. And what's more, some of the people standing up and rattling their chains are big-name female actors. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again with our entertainment correspondent, Melissa Silverstein, who is also the founder and editor of the popular blog site Women and Hollywood. Today, she lets us in on 2014's feminist moments in the film industry. Take it away, Melissa.
If you are a person who follows issues related to women in film as intensely as I do, life is a roller coaster. The numbers for women behind the scenes remain brutal, but the conversation seems to have shifted, and it feels like people are finally fed up and are addressing the gender disparity in a more public way. So as 2014 ends, let's look back at some of the industry's actual feminist moments in hopes that these will lead to a much-needed change. Cate Blanchett started off the year on a feminist note when she won her Oscar for Best Actress and used a global platform to scold Hollywood for not making more movies with women as central characters. Her quote went viral. She was speaking to those of us in the industry who are still foolishly clinging to the idea that female films with women at the center are niche experiences. They are not. Audiences want to see them, and, in fact, they earn money. The world is round, people. She continued her pressure in June at the Women in Film Awards, stating, "Often I find with female-led films, the budgets are smaller and the resulting box office is extraordinary. But it would be great if there were more films led by women that had initial investment, because people want to see stories with women at the center." Blanchett's voice apparently inspired other women to speak up, making 2014 notable as the year when women in Hollywood, particularly women actors, visibly and proudly embraced feminism. Let's start off with Harry Potter actress and Brown graduate Emma Watson. She has joined with UN Women and made a speech at the UN for its new initiative, He for She. Here's what she said. "Why is the word feminist such an uncomfortable one? I am from Britain and think it is right that as a woman I am paid the same as my male counterparts. I think it is right that I should be able to make decisions about my own body. I think it is right that women be involved on my behalf in the policies and decision-making of my country. I think it is right that socially I am afforded the same respect as men." Meanwhile, other top-level female actors also address feminist issues. Hilary Swank has 2 Oscars to her name, yet knows she is not valued in the same way as male actors. While speaking about her new film, The Homesman, she said, "My male counterpart will get paid 10 times more than me. Not double, but 10 times for the same job. I mean, there's 2 genders on this earth. Both are compelling, interesting, diverse, wonderful in all their own separate ways. And yet, there's an influx of male roles, and there's just not for women. Keira Knightley, who co-stars in The Imitation Game, a film about World War II codebreaker Alan Turing, responded to a reporter's query asking why there aren't more or any films on female geniuses. Knightley said, "You're asking if I've ever been offered a biopic on a female genius? No. What's up with that? I would love to play a genius." Joan Clark, the character she plays in the film, was actually a genius, yet no one thinks of making a film about her. If you are interested in seeing female codebreakers of the period, I recommend the miniseries Bletchley Park. Zoe Saldana, who co-starred in the top-grossing movie of the year, Guardians of the Galaxy, talked about the limited types of roles women are offered and how she handles that. "I'd be wasting your money and your time if I played someone who doesn't feel to me like a realistic woman. To me, a woman is not an incompetent, impotent, inept creature. I've never met a woman like that. Yet half of the scripts you read in Hollywood have such women characters." Angelina Jolie has had a pretty remarkable year. Maleficent, a revisionist look at Sleeping Beauty, took the box office by storm this summer. It was one of only a few summer films starring women and is Jolie's most successful opening and her top-grossing film to date. It's extraordinary. A mainstream, big-budget fairy tale that turns out to be a feminist movie addressing rape. Jolie and writer Linda Wolverton were deliberate in identifying the scene where Maleficent's wings are stolen as a metaphor for sexual assault. With a worldwide gross of over $757 million, Maleficent proves that films with female protagonists are successful and that feminist messages are mainstream. Jolie is also breaking out as an increasingly important director, with Unbroken releasing on December 25th. The film, based on Laura Hillenbrand's best-selling book on Louis Zamperini's life, was written by Joel and Ethan Coen and is getting a lot of Oscar noise. It fits nicely in the Oscar wheelhouse, a World War II male-centric story, and it has propelled the actress onto the directing A-list, which includes very few women. Belle might be the second film from Ama Asante, but it was the film that introduced her as well as star Gugu Mbatha-Raw to the United States. This film, about a mixed-race young woman who helps bring down the British slave trade, was also a box office success, making over $10 million here in the United States. Asante's next film will be the studio thriller Unforgettable, written by Christina Hodson. Noteworthy because it has 2 female leads, and it's rumored that one of those leads will be played by Kerry Washington. Jane Campion is still the only woman to have won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, which she shared. No woman has won on her own, and only one of 4 women to be nominated for Best Director at the Academy Awards. This past May, she was the jury president at Cannes and addressed the perennial question that plagues that festival as well as all of the film industry: the lack of women directors. The Cannes numbers are awful. Over the last decade, the number of women directors in the main competition is 8.8%, 18 out of 204. Here's what Campion said at the festival's opening press conference. "There is some inherent sexism in the industry. Thierry Frémaux told us that only 7% out of the 1,800 films submitted to the Cannes Film Festival were directed by women. He was proud to say that we had 20% in all of the programs. Nevertheless, it feels very undemocratic, and women do notice. Time and again, we don't get our share of representation. Excuse me, gentlemen, but the guys seem to eat all of the cake." It's not just the festivals that have a woman director problem. Women have been shut out of making big-budget films. But this year, women cracked that one open. Michelle MacLaren, who has directed the small screens Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad, has been tapped to direct a superheroine movie, the big screen adaptation of Wonder Woman from DC Comics. Till now, every super savior movie has had a male lead. And some more good news. Marvel Comics announced that their upcoming Captain Marvel will also have a female lead. As for the documentary world, no one is having a better year than Laura Poitras. From the moment her film on Edward Snowden, Citizen4, premiered at the New York Film Festival, it went to the top of the class in the documentary race for this year's Academy Award. Poitras' portrait of Snowden is one of the most important stories of our time, and she's been acknowledged as one of the masters in the field. It's also one of the few documentaries to crack $1 million at the box office. Speaking of box office, Jennifer Lawrence and the cast of Mockingjay Part 1 had the top grossing opening weekend of the year. Last year, Catching Fire was the top grossing film of the year, and it was the first film starring a female lead to top the box office in 40 years. Currently, the worldwide box office gross for Mockingjay Part 1 is $560 million, and that's in just 3 weeks. Another box office honorable mention is Obvious Child, led by a breakout performance from comedian Jenny Slate. The Gillian Robespierre-directed film is worth noting because it is a comedy about abortion and was made for about $500,000 and has grossed over $3 million. It's also nominated for multiple year-end awards. I want to give a big shout out to New York Times critic Manohla Dargis for her persistent outing of institutional sexism in the paper of record. Over the last year, she has used her reviews as well as commentary pieces to adamantly remind us that women are not just a box office niche, as well as to deplore the lack of opportunities for female directors. Over the last year, she has used her reviews as well as commentary pieces to adamantly remind us that women are not just a box office niche, as well as to deplore the lack of opportunities for women directors. Here's what she wrote in her review for the box office sensation Divergent. Women warriors are on the rise again in American movies, and so, too, are hopes that they'll be able to strike where it counts in the industry's executive suites. Some of this faith can be traced irrationally or exuberantly to the Hunger Games. Its second installment, Catching Fire, wasn't only the highest-grossing film of 2013. It also pulled in a lot of guys, not just, women, that 52% of North American moviegoers who are deemed a limited demographic, a niche, and a seemingly unsolvable problem. That no one would ever frame male-driven franchises like Iron Man, Spider-Man, and The Dark Knight as niche attractions helps explain that problem. But her December 7th piece entitled Making History may actually be historic. It was on director Ava DuVernay, who is the most exciting headline for women in film since Catherine Bigelow became the first woman to win the Best Director Oscar for The Hurt Locker. DuVernay's story is so exciting because it is virtually impossible for women directors to break through in the awards season. This is for many reasons, including the size and scope of their stories, plus a little fact that in the Academy's directing branch, there are 388 members and only 36 are women. But Selma and DuVernay are a movie and director that cannot be ignored. The film is produced by Oprah and Brad Pitt. It is being released by Paramount Pictures. It is about an incredibly relevant topic to our current times, the African American fight for the right to vote. Ava DuVernay has an opportunity to make history on many levels, including becoming the first African American woman to garner a Best Director nomination. And one last quick note. This year, Julie Taymor hit a milestone. Her musical, The Lion King, became the top-earning work of any media in history. The show has had 75 million viewers and $6.2 billion in sales over its 17-year existence. Not such a bad 2014 after all. Here's to a successful 2015. This is Melissa Silverstein, entertainment correspondent for Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Back to you, Robin.
Thanks, Melissa. And we need to take another break here at Women's Media Center Live, where I am still, Robin Morgan, another year older and deeper in radio. We'll be back in time for some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again in time for Fighting Words. Recently at a dinner party, someone said to me, "We're just drowning in too much information," and somebody else was bemoaning the lack of privacy. The internet being so open, the internet being so filled with information, and our being flooded with it. But it's facile information. The information that we actually are famished for, that we need to nourish our democracy, that we need to nourish our decision-making, that kind of information is kept out of sight, silenced, buried, hidden. Rape is a perfect example, whether on campus, whether in the military, in our daily lives, and battery and violence against women in general. All of these issues surfacing only recently after years of trying to unearth them. Silenced, buried, hidden, denied. And race. I look at the die-ins and the demonstrations, and I'm heartened, deeply heartened, because they're a spectrum of ethnicity among the people is represented, unlike the Occupy movement, which was largely white and very young. This is across ages and races and ethnicities. But it also is because what is coming to light and voice has been buried, silenced, hidden. And that includes slavery. That includes, to this day, the invisibilizing of women of color and what happens to them, because this focus is almost totally on young men of color. Nonetheless, it's part of the same tradition of, if we don't recognize it and don't speak of it, maybe it will go away. And of course, the release of more information on how Cheney and the Bush administration tortured prisoners in our name, your name and mine, is now coming out. Although there's been a huge attempt to stopper that up again. And yes, that release will have a cost, but that cost would have come sooner or later. And we need to know what we've done and what's been done in our name. What is said and not said. How rare a thing truth has become, and truth-telling. Good journalism should, in fact must, include truth-telling, be based on it, and be representative of the alternate reality in which truth exists. And truth is plural, not just singular. Because if we don't know the facts and the truth, and they're not always the same thing, then how can we act ethically, honestly, and effectively, ever? And that's it for today. I am celebrating that my backlist of books, as they call it, continues on reliving into the ebook world. Just in time for holiday giving, The Word of a Woman, my essays, is now available at Amazon, Apple, and all other places where ebooks are sold. And it's available in all formats for Nook, an iPad, etc. If there's a child in your life, my novel The Merchild, a new legend for children and other adults, is also now digitalized and downloadable. Alice Walker called it magical. And my selected and new poems, Upstairs in the Garden, is now an ebook too. I'm very pleased indeed. I'm also hoping that you'll join us next week for our special solstice show. Sister Simone Campbell of Nuns on the Bus will be here, doubtless getting into hot water with the Vatican. Karen Gershon from Project Kesher tells us about this 25-year-old Jewish women's group that is all heart and far more than good works. And Annie Laurie Gaylor will revisit the program to bring us up to date on the Freedom from Religion Foundation, humanists, freethinkers, and atheists. We'll see the solstice in together. Remember to visit us at WMCLive.com for the archive of all our previous episodes, and be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook, Twitter, and at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton. Senior Producer, Crystal Williams-Chancellor. Temporarily sitting in for Crystal is Kate McCarthy. And our founding sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget, next week, The Solstice Show, a show quite like nothing else on radio or in the podcast world. Only here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.